We have a QR code where you can scan and see people's bios in more detail. So I'm going to hustle through those just a high point. So in no particular order, we have Chris Hammond. He's a computer science master's and PhD from Yale, now at Northwestern, hence the purple tie, where he's combining computer science with other disciplines, especially law, and was at U Chicago before that, and a co-founder of a company called Generative AI, focused on turning data into stories. Utku Pamuksuz is an instructor here, PhD and master's, published research, led data science teams at Fortune 500 companies, and has co-founded a company called Inference Analytics, which applies AI to healthcare, and recently ran a very interesting hackathon, which I'm sure we'll be talking about. Ashish Pujari, also an alumnus of the program, principal AI and ML strategist at Amazon, also an instructor at this program, and an instructor at Northwestern's program as well. Steve Barry, also an alumnus, also an instructor, the director of technology and data at William Blair, a globally recognized investment bank, and an expertise in cloud and edge computing, which I have a question on that for sure, and also part of the recent hackathon. And Nishant Nayar, also an alumnus, VP at JP Morgan Chase in their commercial bank, and has years of experience in executing highly complex data programs with an emphasis on data visualization and explainability. Okay, so questions will be handled through the chat. If you're online, just send them on in as you think of them, and we'll be tracking those. And then we'll also be asking people in the room towards the end. We're going to leave about 15, 20 minutes. Then it's up to the Midway Club after the panel. So to get started, we put together a list of topics. It has some structure to it, but really would like a back and forth between people. So I'll call on somebody for a particular question, but feel free to jump in and otherwise run with it. So to start out, I'm going to refer to a McKinsey report, it was recently released, called Exploring Opportunities in the Generative AI Value Chain. This will help us understand where generative AI fits in the overall economy. It says there are 6 parts: hardware, cloud platforms, foundational models, model hubs and ML ops, applications and services, with the last 2, applications and services, being where the most value will be. So I think I'll first go to Chris. Do you broadly agree with that? If not, why not? And what does that mean for people here?
It's hard to agree or disagree with bullet point. I mean, I think that it's. I think it's early days. It's early days to be able to say, "Oh no, this is where it's all going to happen." But it's absolutely and fundamentally clear that there is no aspect of. There's no aspect of human work, endeavor, interaction that isn't going to have some aspect of a generative model associated with it. I'm waiting. I assume it's going to be maybe 4 or 5 months from now, but it could be sooner. I'm waiting for the earbud where it's with you all the time. Certainly integrated. Microsoft is integrated with every single aspect of their work product. I think Google is still holding back a little bit because they didn't really want this to happen now. But yeah, absolutely. This is the most, it was for me, being in AI, I've watched as AI and computation in general has transformed areas, has transformed other fields. For me, this is the first time I've seen a technology mostly driven by the fabulous interface, but a technology actually transformed the way we have to actually think about AI and how we're moving forward. So yeah, it's everywhere. So I have a quick question. Is there anyone in the room who has not used ChatGPT? That's good. I mean, every once in a while, I'll talk to a group and I'll ask that, and there'll be a hand up, and it's like, well, I don't know if it's going to help me, and it's the stupidest thing in the world. I mean, this is a technology that is simply going to be everywhere, and if you ignore it, everyone else will be using it, and everybody else will be thinking about integrating it, and everybody else will be moving forward with it, and you won't. And that's just, that would be sad. But I'm glad you're all at least playing with it. That's it. That's all I got.
So anybody want to disagree, or I saw a lot of nodding actually.
Yeah, first of all, a great, exciting time to be alive, in the first place. I never imagined that, although I work in AI, I teach AI, but I never imagined AI would explode so quickly, so soon. I think anywhere, humans communicate through language, right? We talk to each other through language. We describe business requirements through language. The challenge was that we couldn't build systems through natural language, right? And AI in this current generation has enabled the translation between language all the way to into some form of abstraction these systems can understand. And I think that is transformational. And anywhere where there's a requirement for some engineer to convert human language into system code or software engineering, I think all of that, the middleman process is going to kind of dissipate. So I think that tells you AI can be applied in pretty much anywhere. And I think, the last generation of AI was all about curation. It was about recommendation engines. It was about, recommending products to users, making predictions on fraud versus not fraud. This generation is all about creation, right? And creativity. So it'll also impact the creativity jobs, be it art, music, you name it. And it's already changing in front of our eyes.
Yeah, hi. Just like echoing, but maybe a different lens on this. When I look at this, I've been in IT for a while and technology for a while. I too have never seen a technology revolution like this at all. I think of this as the biggest revolution that we've had since the steam engine. I'm not going to say what the Google guy said, fire, but I do think it'll change jobs dramatically. It'll change jobs like the internet in 1970 didn't do, like the World Wide Web in 1993 didn't do, like cloud computing in 2006 didn't do. This will actually change our society in ways that are profound. And back to your question about apps, services, and things like that, I do think that we'll use services, and that's where we're going to go after APIs of pre-built models like the OpenAI service and things like that. That's in Azure, Microsoft, I think you referred to, Chris. But on the app front, I look at prompt engineering coming into all of our applications. And you see that in the Microsoft products today. They've all got prompt engineering built in there. So it's synthetic first and then editing. And we're going to go to a synthetic generation first concept. And it'll be in communications, I would think. And then we'll edit that work. And that's the short term, I think.
There's one other kind of related to the prompt engineering. The thing that is astounding about this technology is that, and people will talk about ChatGPT did this and ChatGPT did that, and look at how creative it is, and it's not. It's the partnership between the human and the system, and this is the prompt engineering triggered this for me, and that is you'll look at output, you go, that's magnificent, but then you realize that output is the result of a human being going through a set of iterations of making small changes, asking for things, make it shorter, make it a little bit more technical, give me bullet points on these main areas, and the system will do it for them. But it's all about a partnership. And for me, that's the most exciting part of all of this. We're no longer living in a world of output. We're looking at a world of actually partnering with the machine in a very deep and fundamental way, which is to say with language. And that's, I don't know, I actually have no idea how it's going to change jobs. I have no idea. No, I have no idea. There's certainly increases in productivity all over the place. But the question for me right now is, when we look at how it's going to change things, are we just going to decide we're going to use it to make things more efficient, or are we going to use it to scale ourselves? Because I think there's a massive opportunity for us to be able to scale our own thinking in partnership with these sorts of systems. I'll show.
Yes, I have a question actually for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Do you remember when was the first machine learning course offered in Northwestern Computer Science program?
No.
2010. I was there. I remember you. You're still very young.
And, who taught it? Who taught it?
Katsegelos
Oh.
from the ECS. Then Jason Hartline wanted to teach it, and then I was TAing to Gökhan at that
We
time.
must have had a straight machine learning class before that. There's nothing.
Like in the ECS, that was the first time, and nobody knew at that time. 2009, I started my PhD over there. 10, suddenly machine learning became a thing. Then logistic regression was the main topic. And after going over, then we realized that other disciplines, econ, stats, and all the other technical STEM fields are knowing that already. Now, that needs to come under an umbrella called machine learning. It has to be more structured, it has to be more pipeline, and it has to grow like that. So since then, 13 years later, right now, our machine learning class that we're teaching in here is totally deep learning. Logistic regression is not included. So when we see there's a span of improvement, 13 years in this field, if we compare this ChatGPT or generative AI technology with the actual machine learning, I agree with you, Steve, it's very important. However, I don't see a spectrum of improvement as we saw in machine learning field. So there is nothing I can think right now. Okay, well, once we figure out the prompt engineering, instruct GPT, all these causal inference and the reason of chain instructions, then what? All we need more data. What we are going to solve next? In terms of education, I'm thinking, what am I going to teach?
I absolutely agree with. I'm sorry. I absolutely agree with you. I mean, there was this transformation that happened, on November 30th of last year. We already had like dozens upon dozens of foundation models, and people were using them, but they were hardly noticed. And then chat came out, and and then chat came into existence, and even the OpenAI guys were shocked. They thought it was going to be like another one of the APIs that they'd put out, and they just had wrapped a cute little interface around it. And the reality of it was really genuinely shocking to them. But it really came down to that suddenly there was a system that anyone who could use language could use, anyone. And I would make the argument that for me, it was like the transition between Yahoo and Google. Yahoo was fine, a whole bunch of good stuff, fine. Worst interface one could imagine. Google, a box. And the OpenAI really did a lovely job with it. I think that the reason why they said they're not coming out with 5 is because they know 5 ain't going to be all that much better. And the place where it's going to be better is exactly what they're working on now. Plugins, integration with other systems, putting money into doing variants and refinement of both document and interaction level for different fields. So pumping money into law. All of these things are not going to help, not going to move the foundation model forward at all. But it will take it and embed it everywhere. And I think that's what we're going to see a wave of that.
Mathematics is going to be, right, my questions is the same. Foundational architecture models are going to be same. It's the matter of scalability, and hardware needs mostly is going to be the major bottleneck. Do you want to say something?
I have just one different perspective. I come from the business transformation side. Agreeing with everybody what's being said, this is the first time there has been an excitement in the business to learn a new machine learning thing. Till last year itself, before October or November, it was like, hey, this is all technology domain. And as he mentioned, with this chat GPT being so easy, it's become more like a conversation. So all the business users who are not coming into this technology space, and sometimes it was difficult to even get the approvals and budgets and understand then like what's the business benefit of this technology, what we are doing, linear regression for that matter. Now it's more intuitive to them because I have not done anything, but my business user came back to me and said, well, I logged into the chat GPT and I did this thing and it was a conversation. And yeah, it's just democratizing like the machine learning that was not done previously.
I think it's amazingly intuitive and everyone's intuitions are wrong. I mean, this is when we're starting to think about how we go from, oh, I sat down and I played with it and I could make it do this and it was great. How you turn that into an enterprise scaled product is really hard. And we've already seen with the first Bing integration, Google's integration, how lumpy it gets when you start thinking about it as an information system, which a lot of people think of it as, and it's not. And we're sort of in this weird world where it's so compelling that we're going to see people making mistakes with it left and right, and even the larger companies. Google really did, and this is a conversation with Pete Norbig, who just stepped down from running research. He, when it first popped, I was having a conversation with him, and he said, "Yeah, he said, you think we don't have it? Of course we have it. We have we have something exactly on par. We really don't want to push it out now. It's not ready." And then they got bullied into it. So there's that part of it, but we're going to have decisions made by CEOs who read an article in Forbes this morning about some use case that now they think can scale into their enterprise, and they're wrong. So there's a huge, I think there's a huge opportunity for you and it's not even understanding the math, and it's not understanding the things at the algorithmic level. It's understanding the utility of what they really do and how to control them. The taking your skills and mapping prompt engineering, aggressive prompt engineering, and task-driven prompt engineering onto those skills will make you valuable for 2 years. And then prompt engineering as a job will go away because it'll be all integrated. Because that's what. What's next? Then what's next? Then what's next? Well, then we'll ask the robot overlord for now.
Okay, so it sounds like you're saying it's going to change everything everywhere all at once, but when you ask for specifics, maybe it's tough to do. And part of our job description going forward in the future will be saying, no, you idiot, that's not how that works, and you don't want to use it like that. So, but I'll try to get some specifics. You talked about finance in healthcare, Utku especially. How do you see it affecting that? Because that's a huge part of the economy.
Yes, actually, my startup we found in 2018 was focusing on generating radiology reports from the image labels that we ingested. So it's a text generation company. We were trying to do with the word embeddings at the time, RNNs, LSTMs, and we were generating little pieces of the reports step by step, and it was forgetting. It was not remain. If it's like 2 pages, the memory was not good. Generation was not that long. Sequence limitations, hardware limitations, and we really had hard time to get funding in the beginning, and we really had hard time to convince the hospitals how this is going to actually revolutionize how you document the things, because we made a test. 50% of their time is documentation, a physician's time. Think about an hour of a physician time, 50% of is documenting, writing reports. So we really had a hard time to convince or this technology could be adopted, although we came to a level it was generating 2-3 paragraphs 2-3 years ago. But the adoption, there is this resistance. The resistance is this. Actually, Steve made a good point on that. AI adoption in the industries started with the recommendation systems. Why? Because we don't have any precision recall. Oh, that's incorrect. I'm going to lose millions of dollars scared. Recommendation systems, easy. You just recommend. If I accept, yes, you don't lose that much money. Actually, recommendation system opened the AI adoption in many Fortune companies. In healthcare, it was coming behind. Recommendation system is there right now, but everyone machine learning algorithms, classification, regression. Oh, error, 95% accuracy, at least we need. So they remembered like that resistance. But right now, they understand, okay, we got stuck on this accuracies, precision, recall too much, but we're losing the actual value. We're losing the 50% of the FTE, our time. So now the people that we were talking 4 or 5 years ago, the hospitals coming back to us, wait, you were doing something similar, how we can do with our internal data, our doctors, healthcare professionals start using ChatGPT, but we cannot share PHI data with ChatGPT. We want our own ChatGPT. Can you guys do it? So right now the conversation entirely changed to it. I'm so glad that in the end, this has to penetrate in order to evolve, right? And the penetration is happening, and the concern is very legit. Concern is very valid because they said they don't want to put their own data, fine-tune the GPT models on somewhere that they don't know, not to risk the patient data. Direction is good, resources are there. Now the vision change. I'm personally very happy that this is happening. It opened a lot of opportunities which was covered before and which was not noticed before, especially in the development of the healthcare operations. What we want is, why do we want them to save that 50%? Because physicians spend more time with the patients. They can do more research instead of writing mundane notes every day. But seeing that change and adoption, still I didn't see that adoption happening right now. They're in research, how we can make it custom, how we can make it in-house, how we can make it modular with different departments. We don't have to ask and get the answer, what is the capital of France? We just want to focus on medical language. Can we do something like that? So that is where the healthcare industry is right now. And there are two sides. One, the clinical use cases from the physician and the healthcare provider side. And also there is another big storm is happening in West Coast right now in the patient side. Patient interaction with the physician could be automated speech with the ChatGPT-like tools. Can they actually ask the problems, show the problem, take a picture, get the response as if they speak to an actual physician instead of going to doctor for the very high level things? There are a lot of investments going on the patient side as well.
Yeah, I mean, I work with a lot of healthcare companies as well, as part of Amazon. And I think until last year, a lot of the healthcare companies were focused on understanding their data, building warehouses, reporting, business intelligence, and so on. All of a sudden, they're trying to understand patterns in the data that they cannot really observe without knowing what questions to ask, right? For example, Google, you might have heard of this research from Google many years ago, where they're looking at retina scans for patients, right? And they figured out that from the eye scans, you can actually understand if they have heart disease, right? And these are the kind of relations that they would like to discover. There's a lot of interest in reading, PubMed, all of it, correlating it to their own clinical trials, correlating it to their drug research, and building some kind of a abstraction, right, where they can ask questions which are not immediately obvious. For example, how is COVID, the disease, related to, let's say, research in any other field, right? And I think one approach to do that was to build these graph databases where you do a lot of named entity kind of recognition. You build out these graphs. All of a sudden, you have language models now. And again, I think understanding what language is very important to understand what these models are all about, right? Language is not just the language that we speak. Programming is also language. Scat scans are also a language. Music is a language, right? Yeah, all of it is really all these frequencies, so to speak, are just language. And the computers don't make it. The language models don't make a difference between these languages, right? To them, it's just an input pattern, and from there they can create abstractions, and from these abstractions they can derive some kind of a meaning, which is what we call emergence. And that is the most exciting part for me, is the the level of intelligence they might have could eventually become some kind of a super intelligent. They would actually become more intelligent than us, because not only do they have all our data, they are thinking like us, but they have figuring out patterns which our brains may not be capable of figuring out. It's scary, it's exciting at the same time.
Do you know how many neurons in our brains?
Is it like I don't know, 80 billion, 120
Yeah.
billion?
What is the parameter size right now in these models?
Yeah, I'll tell you. So GPT-1 was 117 million neurons, right? GPT-4 is 170 trillion parameters.
Yes,
So,
but parameters, not neurons.
yeah, correct.
So in the human brain, neurons have connections one to many. We have long way to go still to reach the human capacity, right?
That point. But do remember, do recall that the language models, they do one thing and one thing only, and that is they predict the next word. That's what they do for a
Yes.
living. That's what they were built to do. They do it insanely well, but that's what they do. Talking about it in terms of they learn an abstraction, it's not clear that that's what's going on. They certainly, in terms of super intelligence, they're not repositories of knowledge by any stretch of the imagination. The facts that they have are simply patterns that they've seen repeated over and over again. The simplest of reasoning problems defeat them, but you can train them to do certain things. My favorite, I love this example. Who was president when George Clooney was born? How would you answer that question? Oh, for God's sake, you're data scientists. You look up when George Clooney was born and you use that to look up who's president. So it's a two-hop question, right? So you need to get one piece of information to get the other. Until relatively recently, which is to say a month and a half ago, a ChatGPT could not answer that question because it's never seen it. It's never seen that pattern. If we ask it now, it does an interesting thing, and that is it will tell you George Clooney's birthday, and then it will tell you who was president then. But it needs to tell you what George Clooney's birthday first, so it becomes part of the prompt. So its output becomes part of its input. So it now can recognize, oh, that's the right president. If you ask it, tell me who was president when George Clooney was born, I do not want to see the date. It will tell you, first of all, I'll say a couple incoherent things. If you keep asking the question, it'll finally get to Eisenhower. And you look at that and why has it got Eisenhower? And it turns out that George Clooney in his filmography did a lot of films about the political situation during the Eisenhower era. And that's just part of the training. And there's a little bit of predictive power there. If you let it actually say the date, it can give you the answer. And it can actually answer the question, which I really love. What was the birthplace of the first lady who was married to the president whose first name is the same as the first name as the male star of the movie Camelot? And it will deconstruct that. And it has to have the individual things so we can look at it. And it's this weird thing of it has to, and it's think of it as if you were thinking and you couldn't think, but you could read and you could write. And so you'd have to write down facts and then look at them and go, oh, I know that. And then you write down the next fact and look at them and go that. And the world of, and this is into the whole refinement and training, the world of reasoning is a possibility, but it has to be external things that are training these systems on actually how to do this think out loud kind of work. And so Harvey, which is funded by OpenAI, is a legal tech company. What they're doing is they're trying to deconstruct legal reasoning into those steps and train a system how to do those steps. I mean, chat itself is trained in chat, a different kind of interaction than just flow of text. And I think that's one of the things that's going to be huge.
I'll just give you a quick counter example, right? And I was debating back and forth, and there's a split opinion on this, right? People haven't really concluded on whether it's creating that level of reasoning and abstraction until I hit upon this problem. You know, in GPT 3.5, they asked it to arrange a bunch of objects, right? I don't know if you've read that example where there's a book, there's a nail, there's a bunch of eggs, right? It asked you to arrange a bunch of objects and balance them. And GPT 3.5 or GPT 3 got it completely wrong, right? It didn't make sense. And you couldn't really balance them in that form. With GPT 4, and that question has not been asked anywhere on the internet, most likely. I mean, that kind of question wouldn't be asked. It actually put together a bunch of steps by which you can put the book on the table. On top of the books, you layer a bunch of eggs, you know, and then you balance the nail on top. And that is almost like an emergent property. Now, is it really emergent? We don't know. We don't know what it's thinking. But of all the problems that depict human reasoning, I think the only thing it has not really figured out very well is strategic planning. Right, I was reading one of the research, and they're saying that it has figured out solving complex problems, solving mathematical problems, arithmetic not very well. It's still improving there, but strategic planning is something that is a next hop, maybe GPT 5 or 6. But yeah, I mean, it's still an open question. I would agree.
I mean, when you say it's learned, it's not. It was trained. I mean, there are particular sort of reasoning tropes that it's trained in, and it picks those up the way it picks up a whole bunch of other tropes. And it's not that it has to have seen, it's not memorizing. It doesn't have to see exactly a sequence in order to do something with it. But it does need to see things that are of the same type, and it does have some abstraction. I mean, there's abstraction there, but in fact, I think one of the things that's interesting is that from a taxonomic point of view, it does what people do. You give it a context and it will be able to tell you different categories for objects depending upon the context. And that argues that there is a similarity to what we do, but it's a similarity to what we do in one aspect of our reasoning. And I'm sorry, I'm going to give you a sentence. Mary Smith is Stanford's premier roboticist, okay? Mary Smith is Stanford's premier roboticist. One more time. Mary Smith is Stanford's premier roboticist. Is Mary Smith smart? Oh, for God's sakes. Yes. She's Stanford's premier roboticist. You have to answer. Is Mary Smith smart? Yeah. Is she ambitious?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. It's a Friday, and she's been working, and she's smart and ambitious. She's been working really hard. She decides to head home. On the way home, she stops off to get a cocktail. Can she be served at a bar?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Why?
She's over 21.
She's over 21. How do you know that? I didn't tell you.
Stanford's premier roboticist.
So she had to go to college. She had to get a PhD. She had to climb the rungs at Stanford. So she's certainly 21. ChatGPT will tell you there is no aspect of being a premier roboticist at Stanford which gives her the right to order a drink in California. You can train it to decouple. You can train it to reason about that, but a piece of reasoning that you do without thinking is beyond it, because it's having to unpack. It's having to unpack and do sequences of reasoning. It's really not good at that unless it's seen certain things before. And there are places where it does strategic reasoning, which is fine.
Okay, I'll let the record reflect. I've asked 2 questions and we're about 40 minutes in. So on that, following up on that chain of reasoning, if prompt engineering is a superpower, is chain of reasoning being able to do that very well? Is that, say, the super duper power? Utku, I know we've talked about that before.
Chain of thought reasoning.
Yes.
Actually, Professor Hammond is explaining this is arithmetic. There are different reasoning types. The key point in here, we were covering this in our class last week as well. Step by step, deconstructing the question to be able to get specifics. That's what we do in human brain but it's not possible to be able to do to understand how our brain is working and teach it and instruct it to the model. There are variations we can apply, but it is limited right now. We cannot figure out that professor is over 21 without proper pipelining of chain of thought reasoning. One thing that we realize is the researchers in 2019, when they start training this decoder-only generative models, GPT, what they saw is, look, we understood deep learning when you have enough representation, but not memorization, that we can understand the essence of the information, what we're learning from. So I can do some conclusions based on that because I'm not gonna memorize. Good, I will do it with a lot of nonlinear interactions in the neural. What I'm missing is, how about the dynamic sequential environment? Like you can teach a baby to eat a slice of apple with the classification models or the image processing models, but you cannot teach a baby how to walk without reinforcement learning. Then the reinforcement learning came, error trial, then okay, when we mix this up, we're gonna figure out both training and learning. So we will think about chain of thought reasoning afterwards. So the model trained over 2 years, GPT-3, 3.5, 4, and other things. In the meantime, the only thing that matters is like how we're going to interact with the model, reinforcement learning, we're going to feed it to make it better, score it, human interaction, human feedback, they call it RLHF. And then a lot of manual input comes in to make the scores, make the results better, because there may be multiple reasons. Where am I going to visit when I go to Istanbul? Everybody can say different things. How am I going to choose what is the best one? Requires some tuning by the people. They focused on this, but the chain of thought reasoning left to the end. Please correct me, Professor Hammond, if I'm wrong. The researchers are saying that right now, okay, this is efficient. It can learn as much as a human can, but the human brain is much bigger than those as of now. What's next is going to be happening in the field other than hardware scalability. Prompt engineering is actually tying this chain of thought reasoning, how to explain a concept. Like let's say we have kids, they want to solve a problem. We don't want them to memorize the formula. We want them to teach how you generate that formula. If you teach, they will never forget it. It's the same thing. So to the extent where we're going to go in that chain of thought reasoning is going to be the crucial in the prompt engineering, but I don't think it's infinite time. It's not going to take that long. What do you think?
No, I don't think it'll take that long. The thing that's exciting is that, so AI, from the beginning, AI, the notion behind AI was, oh, we'll get knowledge engineers and we'll have them talk with people and figure out what their reasoning patterns look like. And then we'll turn that into code. And it was like, yeah, we'll do that. And then it turns out that as you talk to people and they start telling you how their reasoning proceeds, it doesn't really match up with a program completely. It's good, and but it's not good enough to turn it into real code. But it is good enough to train a language model, and that's what's going to be interesting. And I think that it's for different domains and fields, we're going to see real efforts of data scientists and practitioners walking through their patterns. And that's the bet OpenAI is making with its investments now in external companies. And the question is, can we get a rich enough set of those patterns and get systems trained against those to actually have it be effective? And what we're talking about here is things like Johnny had 10 apples. He sold 5 apples to Sally. He bought 6 apples from Frank. How many apples does he have now? I mean, it's like, and until relatively recently, that would be something where the models would go, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never met these people. Why is he selling apples? Does he have a license? But now it's like, oh, I know how to decompose the problem. And an OpenAI worked really hard to get there. And the question is, can we get there at the more specific domain field level in a way that's powerful enough to do something like, then everybody see the Trump deposition?
Which one?
You don't respond anyway. There was a moment in the Trump deposition where he went through a series, there was a series of questions. There was a series of questions that were functionally, people under these circumstances, that is stars, are allowed to do these things. And there was a one question or another question or another question. And then there was a final question, and that is, are you a star? Now, if you think about his personality, it's clear what the answer from him would be. He could not stop himself from saying, well, I think so. But he's already set something up so that that question is the linchpin of a confession. All right. Knowing how to do that is really hard. And that's very different than saying, oh, are you, do you sexually assault people? No one would answer that. Yes. So you don't answer that question. You ask a series of questions, and it's that kind of decomposition, which is going to be so exciting to see brought to these models.
Okay, interesting. So a slight change of gears in that, because we took questions from people when they registered, and we had many variations of the same question is, so do I need to like reskill, upskill? Do I still need Python and R and all that stuff? From a more applied perspective with what you're seeing out in your respective companies, and go to Nishant and Steve on that. What are your opinions there?
Sure. And what was that again? The question, just so to make sure.
Yeah, it's if I'm a current student in this program.
Tools that we still use are these. Interesting. You know, we're going to a world of no code, low code, less code, writing less code. You're writing too much code, services, model, right? So we're talking about, these are all, but you know, on the, where I see, I mean, where we're working, yeah, it's still all Python. I don't necessarily see that the, you know, for those who are training custom models, building prompt engineering off it, I think the tools that we still use are still going to be there. I don't see that going away. I think that those tools that we use though will get a lot more advanced. So we're going to see these prompt engineering tools or you know, these large language models enter the tooling. You know, we're about to really get on a revolution with coding that's going to come a new way. So I think the way we write code is going to change. But you know, these predictions of we're going to code 7 times faster, we're going to do these things. Yeah, but it's kind of like the doctor. We don't spend all of our time coding. We do our time requirements gathering and everything else. The coding is just a small part of it. Yeah. So I don't fundamentally, I mean, the tools will change, we'll get new ways and methods, but I don't necessarily, I think it'll get more open. I don't necessarily see it going away. I don't see that yet.
Yes, I agree. One thing, I think the importance of cloud computing and the big data platforms gaining a lot more value right now, because you have to you need hardware, you need to do how to do parallelization, you need to know how to parallelize your code. Like for example, why these large language models couldn't be trained for a long time, because you were not able to parallelize recurrent neural networks before, because they were not getting sequence as it is. It was taking token by token. So we had GPUs and you cannot parallelize it. Right now you can. We have all the resources. Understanding what are those parameters I'm telling you, 7 billion parameter llama model. You need to understand as a data scientist how much memory you need in GPU to be able to instruct, tune it or fine tune it or apply prompt engineering. And you have to define the resources. That's the first step. That's different than what we were not very familiar. In terms of technical development, we have to train ourselves a little bit over I don't want to say laziness, but it's not very smart not to utilize it. For example, in our class last week, we needed to create some prompts to instruct one open source model, but we used ChatGPT to create those prompts for us. Well, it is actually good because you just give couple of samples, say generate similar ones. So then in the end, you have 100,000 instruction points. My biggest fear was I'm an open source person. That's why I was so angry when the OpenAI ChatGPT, they didn't do any documentation. There is no paper. I can't read it. I can't understand it. And it drives me crazy. And luckily, the Facebook Professor Lacoon is that Llama is going to be research on it. It's going to be open. And I think last week, Mosaic just released the first open source commercially available version of it, which is going to be much more on that. My personal recommendation to you is to understand these terms very well. What is fine tuning? What is instruct tuning? What is prompt engineering? What is few shot, zero shot? And what is the pre-training a model requirement? Because this is not the same what you learn in the program. We did teach you how to fine tune a BERT. For example, you can fine tune it because the downstream task is there. It learned sentiment analysis. You just give more data, fine tune it. This large language model fine tuning is not the same because they do multitask learning. When you fine tune, there is catastrophic forgetting happening. There is a lot of hallucination can happening. It is fundamentally different than what you have learned. So don't underestimate that fine tuning. If you already done a lot of fine tuning, don't think it's the same. It may require a little bit of extra, and the fine tuning needs to be redefined. Actually, feature extraction, fine tuning, those things need to be refined. Other than the coding itself, those methodologies and understanding the requirements, what to do for which task, which language model would be the key in terms of technical learning.
I'd like to add a couple of things. So I started my career as a software engineer. So when I was going to school back in India many years ago, I was writing code in C, C++. When I joined my first job, I was writing code in Java, which was slightly more abstracted, more object-oriented, if you will, more memory managed, etc. Later, I moved to R and Python when I became a data scientist, and I'm, in my heart, I believe that English is going to be our next programming language. It is already happening, right? The question is, should we still learn Python? Well, Python is a very high level abstracted language already. I mean, we just call a couple of libraries, third-party tools, and Python does all the work for us. People are already using large language models to improve the efficiency of their existing Python code, right? So you can use LLMs as a tool to enhance your coding style, your coding patterns, to write unit test cases for you, to automate code, do ML ops, deployments, automated fashion. So, but I also believe that if English does become the future programming language, right, it obviously changes a lot of jobs for many people, but it also enables a lot of us, let's say you want to be an entrepreneur, right? You don't want to invest your $100,000 to hire a bunch of software engineers who can translate your requirements into code, right? Again, if you can directly program the machine through language, right, then you're adding value, you're getting speed, you're delivering the product sooner to the market, time to market reduces. So I think there's a lot of benefits of actually slowly moving away from just programming language. I mean, who writes code in assembly language anymore? My dad used to. And he was doing his research in export systems back then, So I don't do that. I never had to do it. So similarly, I don't think our future generations will write code in Python. It is here to stay for now, obviously. I mean, if you have heard of tools like AutoGPT, if you have heard of tools like, LangChain, for example, I'm using a lot of LangChain these days. It's a Pythonic interface to OpenAI's API. Right, where you can build agents, if you will. So if you know Python, you can build those agents really fast and easy. But I don't know how long it is here to stay. But
I'll agree with few points. I'll start with what Steve mentioned. in our regular corporate life, we don't do coding for more than 30% of our hours. 70% is requirements gathering. I don't want to call meetings, let's call it requirements gatherings. The documentation, though we all lack there, let's not go there also. But few things definitely are my personal choice. I never ask anybody whether you know R or Python. I give them a functional problem and see if they can logically deduce what needs to be done. For us, coding is a teachable skill. So somebody can be hired. I got hired right out of the BCom, which is an accountancy program, and the company taught me how to do the coding. So coding can be taught, logical reasoning cannot be taught. And I'll take his example. If we have to identify whether she's overachiever, she can get a drink, I need to have that logical reasoning step. And that's what we are going towards, prompt engineering. Learning R or Python, it's not important. Learn any coding skill. Have your logical reasoning, deductible skills there. Going forward, if ChatGPT is the future, if we don't scare it away with either the regulations or overusing or over abusing it, the prompt engineering, how you logically split your problem and get to where you want to do. Otherwise, the system will hallucinate. It will give you all different types of reasons why you should not, or what you should be looking for. And it will give you a different answer altogether. So my suggestion, one programming language, but concentrate on logical and deduction skills.
You know, yeah, okay. You know, I've been thinking about this for a while. You know, so we're going to see a lot of changes coming up really quickly, right? We're going to have prompt engineering in Visual Studio Code. Microsoft's going to release that later this summer. We're going to have things with Microsoft in the OpenAI world where we're going to be able to describe applications in the Power Platform and have them built. You know, and all this hype and all this stuff going on, I see a bunch of untrained people going out there to try to take advantage of this. And like when anything we see on a hype scale with technology, I think I heard something back in 2016 that something like 5% of ML projects actually reach production in Fortune 500 companies. 13. But you know, it's just a thought.
I do think there's the level of hype associated with large language models is extraordinary, but I don't think it's unwarranted. I think that everyone's going to make mistakes. I mean, it's mistakes will abound. I mean, the misconceptions that people will talk about. Oh yeah, oh my God, the danger here is that these could create misinformation that goes out in the world. And it's like, no. The misinformation associated with these models created by journalists right now way outweighs anything that they'll ever create, because they're just going around saying whatever it is that they can think of saying about usually just about output, but not about process. For you and jobs and work, and it's not going to change so fast that there are skills that you have that are going to go away. But you should get in the mode of, and I think to the renaming of your program, of thinking that you have to be practical here. That is to say that you have to understand exactly what these things are doing, not necessarily even at the technical level, but at a functional level, so that you can actually walk through the functional capabilities of these systems with the people who want something, and do what data scientists are supposed to do, and that is work as the interface between the business and the solutions that we can actually provide with our technologies. But become so conversant, become so good at your examples and use cases and understanding tasks and decomposing those tasks into things that can be executed. That's where your value is. And I get, yes, it's you know, and being able to program a little bit is always good. But you don't want to lose the one thing you don't want to lose by saying, oh no, you don't need to learn how to program anymore, is you don't want to forget that there is such a thing as computational thinking. And it's a discipline of actual problem decomposition, and understanding how to modularize things, how to architect things, how to actually isolate concerns, the contracts between the things that you're building, and you don't want to lose that. The fact that you can or cannot write Python is meaningless. Although I have to admit, of all the things that have happened here, the big thing for me with this pop is that I have written more code in the past 4 months than I have written in the last 5 years before. Because I mean, my lab, we're building, I hate to say it, we're building you, because it's always been my goal is to build you. We're building what's functionally an Oracle. That is a domain independent Oracle where you can drop data down, answer 7 questions, and now you can have a conversation with a system about the world through the eyes of that data. But it's a separate system, and its analysis is separate, and all those things are separate. It's not just training the model, which is the other thing to do. Think in terms of how do you embed these things in different use cases and different kinds of workflow. I think there's a ton of work that needs to be done there.
So it sounds like there's a lot of work as an entrepreneur. Got some entrepreneurs on here, and also as an intrapreneur when you're already in your company and you're trying to apply these things. Okay, so I think speaking of hype, there are already people kind of moving on to the next thing. AutoGPT, MetaGPT, Bedrock. I don't even know what those last 2 are, but I was hoping we could put that in context. So Ashish, give some color there.
Yeah, sure. So I don't know if you've heard of AutoGPT. Basically, AutoGPT is one instance of ChatGPT prompting another instance of ChatGPT, right? And the idea here, and it's one of the most popular projects on GitHub right now. You can actually git clone it and start working with it. The idea here is you can actually assign it tasks, right? And it'll automatically accomplish these goals for you, right? So for example, you can say, get me, search the best laptops on the internet right now for this price and this budget, right? Tell me where I can get the best price for this laptop, tell me the brand name, and tell me why you think it's a great laptop, and generate a text file for me and drop it in my laptop. So you go to sleep, you come back, it's all there for you. It has generated the code to do the search. It has scanned the websites that contain the data. It has downloaded the data, it has scraped it, and it has summarized it for you and figured out the prices, right? It's one of the most popular projects. You can check it out. It's called AutoGPT. Another tool, MetaGPT. MetaGPT is something you can actually, is an accelerator for building applications, web applications. You can say, I want an app with 3 text boxes, which does X, Y, and Z, which summarizes some code for me, right? So immediately it'll start drawing the app for you. You can iterate on the designs and make it a better and better web application without writing a single line of code. It's all in English, right? So that's MetaGPT. Bedrock is actually Amazon's take on generative AI, right? We just released the service in the last, I would say less than a couple of months. And the idea is, you can have a lot of foundational models on Bedrock. For example, Amazon already has its own foundational model called Titan, but we're also partnering with companies like, a lot of the startup companies, Stability AI for open diffusion models, Cloud, which is another company, I think it's Anthropic. So we're partnering with them to have their foundational models on Amazon Bedrock, which is basically generative AI as a service. And we're offering this to our customers. So I'm very excited about that. And then the customers can take these models and fine tune it for their own purposes. The whole concern about not having to send your own data to the cloud, to somebody else's cloud, which is concerning for a lot of industries, those concerns will be mitigated, if you can have ownership on that instance of the model for your own purposes. I think that's one of the goals. But a lot more is happening in that area. So. So I want to mention one more thing, which is Amazon is also heavily investing in hardware acceleration. We have new chips. It's called, for Trainium, we have for training, machine learning training. And we also have new chips for fast inferencing. Inferentia version 2 has come out, which speeds up your compute, 4x, 5x from the previous generation. So I think to Utku's point earlier, it's all about speed because these language models take forever to learn. So can you build your own language models? Well, you can because the chips have become faster and more efficient. You don't spend so much energy in terms of electricity and cost training on these processors. So
The last one cost $200,000, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah,
It's not bad, actually.
Yeah.
Like, because hosting the OpenAI is like monthly $3 million.
Yeah, Google has the new model. Sorry, I'm speaking a lot, but Google has a new model. It's called Palm 2, which is competing with the GPT version 4. Palm 2 actually has many versions, right? Small to big, and the smallest model, I think it's called the Gecko, which is the smallest Palm variation. It can actually fit on your cell phone, so you can have a local instance of a large language model sitting on your cell phone. It's that small, so.
So we've talked about how these tools can get democratized. We're putting it in the hand of the common man. From what I'm hearing you saying, they might also be commoditized, which is to say one's quite like another, and they're actually, it can be pretty cheap to train and push out there. Does that sound about right?
What is the cost to you, Dr. Hammond, to your own system?
I mean, we're using Akka. So it's, and it's sitting on relatively standard machine, which is nothing. It's nothing. But that was the point behind Alpaca, was that it was way cheap. The thing I don't like about it, the thing I actually don't like about it is that, well, it is a research. Well, it is a research device, or it's a research project. We see the potential commercial aspects of it. Then you can't. So we have to. We're going to figure out how to move off of Alpaca because there are too many licensing constraints.
Yeah, they just released the Mosaic, which is also utilizing it commercially since yesterday.
Okay.
Same performance.
I mean, the thing the chip comment I think is important. I mean, there are very specific pieces of computation which if we could improve those, it's like a chip level improvement in software. It's like, okay, we can get there. Then we can speed things up as well. And that's the nice thing about I think where we are right now is that there are all these opportunities to make things better. And yeah, we're commoditizing. I think this will be, again, end of this year. It'll be cheap. It'll be cheap. It will be available, and it will be embedded in a whole bunch of things. It wouldn't occur to us there would be embedded in. And I have to admit, I look forward to having a bud in my ear. Where no matter where I am, I mean, this was our slogan. This is my lab slogan for years. No matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, no matter what you're thinking, we will get to you. We will get you to what you need, and that's a large part of this. But it means that there are images, and that's great. There's language that's great, but also using your VR the glasses and your GPS and your calendar and everything you've ever bought on Amazon, and then using all of those as part of the context for a conversation with something that's helping you through the day. That's actually, I'm thrilled by that possibility, and that's just, you look at it, you can see it coming.
Yeah, I would see that. I see that. I'm gonna say as I'm walking out, write Matt a quick thank you letter for hosting this panel and edit it and send, right? We're going to a world like that. In chips, you kind of got me thinking about the chip change and chip revolution. it seems like we're going to have competition now in GPUs, and it's not just going to be an NVIDIA show. Intel wants to get in on this game, and so I think that competition is going to, create some dynamic changes in the short terms.
Okay, interesting. So I'm going to ask a question. What's life without a little risk? I might be met with stony silence, or we might talk for another hour. Well, let us. What are the risks around which the AI community itself should develop rules and customs? And I'll put a little code on it before the lawyers get to it. So Steve, you're making the mistake of looking at me, so I'm going to go to you on to answer that one.
This is very timely, right? We had the congressional hearings this week with Sam Altman, and you've had George Hinton and all that stuff go on. When new technology happens, any new technology, it's a dark corner for people. They don't understand it. They don't know what it is, and they fear it, right? I mean, I've heard my entire life that technology is going to kill us and ruin our lives and be over. I'm fearful of regulation at this point. I think that they'll mess it up. I don't think we're moving that fast. I think we're a long way away from AGI. And we have a lot of innovation to happen. So, I think there's a lot of talk like on the super large trained models. Should we put some governance around that? Should we put regulations around that? For me, it just doesn't feel right now. I don't really have great answers, but I think that, I think I'm concerned about government regulation in the space.
So I, amongst other things, I run something called the Center for Advancing Safety Machine Intelligence. This is an interesting issue right now. So Altman, I loved watching Altman sit in front of Congress and say, "Oh yeah, there are real possible harms. I'm not going to really go into detail about what they are, but there are real possible harms, and we should have some regulation, maybe licensing, so any new company has to go through some training." Of course, not me. And it was the argument of the entrenched, and that is stop other people from getting into my space. The document that was signed, that was the slow down document, where it was like, oh yeah, a technology leadership signed this document. There wasn't a single person who signed that document who thought there was any possibility of it being effective at all. And then there's Hinton, and I love Jeff Hinton. I love him. The man is brilliant, and the man worked on neural nets when they didn't work. And he kept working and working. And I'm talking about 40 years of people telling him to stop working on that. And then it worked. And he steps out and says, well, golly, it's now occurred to me that there are dangers here. And in his very first interview, he said, we all know about the existing dangers and harms associated with AI, but I'm not here to talk about this. I want to talk about the existential problems having to do with highly intelligent devices that don't think the way we think. And I listened to that and I thought, this is like going to Mary Smith. You're out with Mary Smith. This is like going to a bar and a buddy of yours gets really drunk and is stumbling towards his car. And what you do is you sit him down and you talk about the dangers of alcoholism. You talk about how this is going to damage his liver. And what you should be doing is taking away his keys, because there are dangers now. So it is demonstrably the case that we have technologies out there that are AI or AI affiliated that cause massive and traumatic depression in young women from the ages of 13 to 23. It is demonstrably the case that we have technologies out there that, because of the notion of engagement as a business model, are designed to be addictive. It is well known that there are technologies out there that will actually drive you into making decisions that you don't really want to make because of the ordering of certain kinds of micro decisions. We are not doing anything about those. And I would much prefer to have it be that we just focus on those, and we can regulate the hell out of that. And we can actually protect a lot of people. But what happens is that it is true, you have a congressional hearing and you get Lindsey Graham going, would it be possible to build a drone that could make a decision about killing somebody? And it's like, sure, what do you think a decision is? It's recognizing somebody's face and then blowing up. I mean, there's not a lot of depth to it. It's like we could have built that 3 or 4 years ago, 6 years ago. But we get so excited about the flashy problems that we miss the real ones. There's something that would be good for everyone to look at. That's something called the AI Incident Database, which is an organization that mines media for harms associated with AI. And it's not just, oh, and every once in a while a Tesla will run somebody over because, in fact, they don't do a good job of handoff. It's the problems that accrete over time. It's the problems that are psychological, as well as we still have a system in place, a compass to help parole boards make decisions, which is demonstrably racist, right? And then you've got, and for me, it's like Sam Altman sitting there in front of Congress saying, we should do something. Sam, you want to tell us what data you use to train your system? No, I'm not going to tell you that. And in fact, I will never tell you that. And I don't have to. I am really, really rich. And my company is really, really powerful. Do you think that anyone in the world today, if you said, we want to shut you down, you think that the world would not be up in arms over that? So I believe in regulation, but informed.
So I have a question for you, Professor. Then there can be regulation at the federal level, which is like forced regulation. But what about the regulation at a corporate level? Like you're a bank and you want to be responsible. And as you pointed out, these LLMs are modeled on a database that we don't know. They can have an inherent bias, or they can have skewed metrics, and that can impact your decision making. Let's say I'm writing a code to generate a loan for somebody and I'm using that LLM database. So shouldn't there be some regulation or some checks and balances, if you want to call it, at a firm-wide level?
I think anybody right now who thinks that they can use large language models to do direct decision making for them, without understanding that if they were trained in a certain space, there's probably bias there, or even understanding that if you train a system that is making decisions about loans and you use your own data, then you realize, oh my God, we're racist too. I mean, the problem with the model of we're gonna train things on what we've already done is that what you're doing is you're saying we want the future to look like the past, and if we think the future should look like the past, then we have to take another approach. I think the most responsible thing to do right now with language models is to treat them for what they are, and that they're language models. They're even named that. They're fluency models. They're fluent. And what you need to do is have other pieces of reasoning that actually use them and actually take advantage of that fluency. But not make decisions. Yeah, I think companies should be more responsible.
So would that not be a case for not to use a chat GPT, but build a local LLM, let's say for medical purposes or for some bank purposes, where the data that bank has curated, modeled, knows that there is no bias, or they know that the bias existed in the previous model and we can work around that one?
Yeah, I mean, you know, people get to pick their own models. I mean, you're certainly not going to use something that looks like the web version of chat. The APIs protect your data, but it's, yeah, you have to decide. Okay, I'm going to protect my data. I'm going to protect my IP, because right now, if you type something into the web version, it gets shipped off. And there are a couple of companies who realize that you don't describe a client problem to a system that is going to share that data with everybody. so you have to, I think you have to attend to all the data and privacy issues, all the issues having to do with how do you want to train your systems. And then I think for most organizations realize that, like, and if they really think the past worked, then use it. But often the past didn't.
So great points. I think I'm less worried that AI will, kind of kill me right now, because unless somebody puts, ChatGPT into an airplane, which is not happening. But Tesla cars are already driven by AI. I mean, we all know this, right? Self-driving cars are already driven by AI of a different kind, but they have been tested through and through. The genie is already out of the bag. You cannot really stop development research on large language models. If we don't do it, somebody else will do it. But we definitely can put some regulations on the applications of ChatGPT, especially when it comes to critical use cases like transportation and where people's lives are involved. My concern actually is more on the side of content creation. We all know that, definitely these large language models are learning from the net, from the web. What are they learning on? For example, I use ChatGPT to write a lot of code for me. I know that a lot of these ideas are coming from coders and developers around the world who have contributed to GitHub repositories, open source repositories. Are they being compensated for the work that they did that these language models are learning? Getty Images recently sued, I believe it was Anthropic or Stability AI, one of them, because they were scraping tons and tons of images to produce new art, new images on using AI, right? So what about the artists who had created those icons and those photographs and those images, right? So, so the question is, should these models be open source and public and free to use? Or should these companies have some way to compensate these engineers and developers and creative artists? Because let's say I want to build an icon for my company. Let's say I'm an entrepreneur. I want to build an icon for my company. Before I had to go download a couple of icons, maybe pay somebody to build it for me. Right now, somebody like Stability AI can produce 10,000 icons, at the click of a button. And I wonder what happens to those creative people whose ideas have been influencing these large language models. So yeah, I mean, it's a crazy time.
Sad, right? But what really affected me, when I read a research article, I used to understand from the tone of the language who's the author. I was guessing it, but right now it is changing. Even the email that I'm receiving, it is like all same. Like it is going to be very stereotyped. That is the factor that I want to support you.
But so I'll put a point against that one. So I work on the product management side of the things. So one things that we use for, or I have used ChatGPT for, was to simulate a persona to see how that person will behave in a certain circumstance. So yes, I get it. Like if you see the document, you believe it's written by some Harvard professor, whereas it could be written by ChatGPT. But there is a positive case. I can, rather than doing a market study to figure out how a typical Indian with an age group of 30 to 45 will behave in this circumstance, I can create that persona in ChatGPT and get that value out. Now, I'm not saying it's right, because what Ashish said, that genie is out of the bag. I remember I did a search long time back and I said, is Earth flat? Yes, I can see some Wikipedia pages that says Earth is flat. It's your choice. You want to do a little bit deeper on it and check the validity of that scenarios. So there could be some possibilities like this can help.
Yes, but one thing in the technical side, Dr. Hammond can help me on this. Metrics we're using, when you generate a text, how you're gonna measure the performance accuracy, even if you do it with your own company or hospital, right? There are machine translation model metrics like ROC scores and other, but it's not capturing everything you say. Yeah. Like you can say the same thing by using entirely different set of words. That's also another concern for me. When you do content generation, you gotta improve the performance, and how you're gonna measure it is going to be.
One thing, definitely the content creators and the ones who create new content. Like they are not going out of the business. Even with ChatGPT, we can create a UI based on that meta thing that you are talking about. But how to visualize it differently, how to move from Samsung to Apple or from flip phone to Apple.
Yeah.
ChatGPT cannot do that, man. So you need some creative brains and those who are out of the box thinkers. ChatGPT is still within the box thinking because it's being driven on the models that you know.
Okay, so we're going to try to transition to the Q&A portion unless everybody just wants to send in some zingers based on that last one. So
One thing, you're so right. The ChatGPT all by itself, and then when it teaches to ask it to generate something, the text it generates is so shockingly banal. And it was, and in fact, when they went through the reinforcement learning phase of things, it was rewarded for being loquacious. So it's long-winded and banal. But it is what's for me. What's interesting, both I'm less facile with the image generation side of this. But the thing that's really interesting is that when it does something good, really sweet, you can see the touch of the person who was working with it. And that's why I always like to go back to we're going to get this wonderful kind of creative partnership that exists between the machine and human beings. And I have to admit, I'm one of the people who's putting the nail in the coffin of creativity. So we're probably in like 3 weeks, we're opening a show at the Annoyance Theater. It's a combination of AI and human beings, but the AI is it's not writing it. It's a performer. And so it's avatars, speech to text, certainly a language model underneath, but a language model that is really got a massive context for every single moment of its little life. What I'm finding is that we even find with the performers who are working with it, they find new ways to perform to get the impact they want from the system itself. And because the system is listening to them perform and does monologues based upon what they're doing. But then you realize that you can get it to talk about your stuff a little bit more. And living in that world, I think is going to be an exciting thing. So yeah, we'll get, you can generate 10,000 icons, but they'll all be kind of like,
we see with coding programs that they're starting to write in your style. And I expect that to happen, that you're gonna start to see your voice come out in it. And that's an inevitability here. And one thing, Ashish, the clouds have been killing content creators for a long time with reselling open source and not getting it back to the creators, right? They're kings about that. And the clouds are going to control this world, I think. And when we talk about regulations, just one last little thought, I know we want to go to Q&A, is, if we keep the government out of it, you just said that somebody got sued because they did whatever, that's the controls we have in society. The controls always follow the technology. They don't precede it. We had the internet, and then we came up with firewalls 3 years later and said, oh my God, what are people doing? So that those controls are going to come through litigation, lawsuits. Companies are going to learn this. As I work in finance like Unishot, and I always say to people, I would rather work with children serving them food in a nuclear power plant because it's less regulated. So I expect that to happen, right? I expect the controls to be built up by organizations because they don't want to be singed.
okay, so the panel ended in litigation and lawsuits. So there we go.
There is one thing that I was curious, like 5-6 years ago, I was consulting to an insurance company. For example, the case was if a self-driving car had an accident, who is responsible? Is it the manufacturer? Is it
Subrogation.
like AI models or those, self-driving car model generators? Like even it took like 4 years to define who's going to be responsible. It's so late. But I don't think this one is going to be that late. Everyone is so on it because it's a different, very important innovation. I don't think it's going to be that late.
Okay. All right, so we're going to switch between online and, if we have time, in person. So, speaking of a broad topic here, taking from online, how will AI affect the future employment opportunities of working class families and disadvantaged communities? Will the rich get richer, so to speak? Steve, I saw you nodding a little bit, so I have to go to you on that one.
You know, I started off as a history major in undergrad, so I think of these terms. The steam engine is what I started with, and I think that changed jobs. We went from agribusiness to professional classes because of the steam engine. We mechanized agribusiness. I think this is going to be like Flint, Michigan with GM, where they pulled out really quickly. It's going to happen fast, and a lot of people are going to get caught up in that mix. And so for a generation, they're going to get hurt by that. As we start to, advance this a little bit further, I think future generations will catch up. But, there's some generational harm coming our way, I think. It's my personal thought.
Yeah. Especially perhaps at the white collar level, if not the blue collar.
Oh,
everybody.
Yeah, well, in economics, the rich get the rich get hold of it.
There would be some realignment of the job profiles. I think there would be some realignment of the job profiles. The human aspect would be used to solve bigger and complex problems. The smaller problems like writing some insert statements or very small issues.
Jobs. These things are going away.
Actually, white collar is going to be much more efficient.
But that happens every time, like we were agrarian society, then we became industrial society, then we became tertiary industries. So this is just a job realignment. It's not going to say like, come 6 months down the line, ChatGPT would be everywhere and 50% of the population would be out of the job. Nothing like that. Definitely some impact, but then it would be absorbed into some other new job profiles that needs to be developed, like prompt engineering or moving to low code, no code solutions, things like that.
I think the problem is not so much that our jobs are going to go away. The problem could be that we might need less of these jobs, right? Think of these legal contracts, right? We already had examples where there are companies that are able to scan legal documents and make a prediction as to whether this contract will go into litigation or not with 99.9% accuracy, right? So do you need so many lawyers who get paid $400 an hour, right, anymore? Or do you need like 5 lawyers instead of 100, right? Do you need 100 software engineers or do you need just 5? So the question is, as the world population is growing, how do you keep people employed?
Well, radiologists are going to be replaced at some point because the machine generated data, but those radiologists can be trained to be surgeons. We could have more surgeons. We can allocate that talent to something. Cannot be automated.
Yeah, and there's this moment where we could decide, okay, we have 100 lawyers over here and we've made things more efficient. We only need 10. And it's like, that's great if we already covered all of the needs that people had. This is something I mentioned before. We all end up having to make a choice. You can either decide that what we're going to do is we're going to become more efficient and we're lean and mean and we need fewer people working, or we can decide we're going to do more. If you are, this is going back to working class. If you are being evicted by your landlord and you're somewhat disadvantaged, or you're just not like, solidly middle class, you're not going to be able to get a lawyer. You're not going to know what to do. You don't know what your rights are, and you're kind of screwed. And we could get rid of all the lawyers and you're still kind of screwed. Or we could decide, no, in fact, what we're going to do is we're going to make an effort. And for all the things that we do where we have let people fall behind, we're going to use this technology to actually bring them forward. And we're going to stop with this notion that that efficiency is the only thing. And the question is whether or not we're capable of that. I mean, I don't know if we're capable of
I'm
that.
sorry, I will interrupt so we can get a bit more questions in. Do we have any questions in the room? Okay,
All right, and I'll say, we have happy hour today, so keep in mind that the length of your answers, you're keeping people from happy hour.
So following up the discussion about employment and the coding, I have a question. So if one day the natural language will be the coding language, so like I think maybe a lawyer can do better than a data scientist. So we also heard about the AI already started to replace some jobs of the software engineer, like the entry levels. So here's my question, maybe our program students or alumni care about the most. I mean, will that replacement someday happen to data scientists? Whether being a data scientist still be a valuable career track, or do we have to transfer to like product manager or requirement management, something else? Yeah, thank you.
I'll take the first one and I'll let others chime in. So data scientists are not going out of the job, and I'll tell you why. ChatGPT will help the developers, those who are not trained on data science roles, take over some of those data scientist activities, freeing up the real data scientists to handle more complex problems rather than handling the common level problems. Because I'm in a corporate, I run a code, I have an error or an issue, I first pick up the phone and ask data scientist, and he will just say, it's a small bug, fix this one, but he still uses his half an hour, 30 minutes to help me. But if I'm able to write that same thing with ChatGPT, his 45 minutes are free for doing something else, something better, and trying to understand more areas, more domains. So data scientist jobs are not going away, definitely. But one thing definitely is going to be there. The focus would be more on interpersonal skills. So how can you interact with lawyer, understand the requirements, translate back into the prompts, data scientists understand what can be done better. And the components of your interpersonal skills might grow. Right now, it might be 30 and remaining coding skills. Going forward, it might become 50-50. Eventually, it might become 70-30 also.
Okay, I think let's try to squeeze in another in-person question if we can. So,
I got the last question. I was curious if you all saw the Coca-Cola like AI commercial that came out like within last week-ish. So Coca-Cola worked with OpenAI and they built a really good commercial in like 11 days. You should look it up online. It's really good. And so, my curiosity, even though we're data scientists, is, all these, I guess when I was in the program, a couple of years ago, we always talked about sort of, the creative aspect is always going to be there. And then you see like AI that, I'm sure it's the iterative process, but it seems, when prompted, you can get really creative with it and scale quickly. So I just want to, I don't know that
It took them 11 days.
That's what I'm told. Yeah.
That seems like an afternoon's work.
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of, I mean, they're technically in trial right now. So
I haven't seen it. So what's the length and breadth of it? I mean, did it write the commercial? Is it the full animation of the commercial?
Yeah, I think that's a little unclear. And I guess part of my question is, as we think about like, roles in the future, like every company is going to see this commercial and want to do that.
But here's the thing, you just brushed off. Well, I know there was an iterative process.
Yeah.
Do you think that those 11 days where they set it up and they flipped a switch and they walked away and they came back in 11 days? I mean, that was, they were trying, they had to figure out what needed to be done. They had to figure out what, they had to have a starting point. They probably had more than one starting point, a constant refinement through the prompting. I mean, and there's a massive human component to that will not go away. I mean, that's, and I say that it will go away eventually, but we're not going to see it. You can't work in AI unless you believe that all aspects of human cognition can be brought to machine. I mean, you can't. So I do a fair amount of relatively creative work in terms of creative, in terms of producing output that is not in the realm of fact, but in the realm of sort of storytelling. I find it an incredibly enjoyable and creative process. It's not like the thing is stealing from me, it's enhancing me. And the other thing is that to the refinement that Steve, I think you mentioned it, the programs you write within the environment you're in, if it's learning from you, you're going to look more like you. So we're taking everything I've ever written and we're training a model based upon it because I actually want to write more. I have no sense of embarrassment over the fact that the machine will be part of it. In much the same way that I have a woman who works on communications for me. We write things together. I mean, that's what you do. And so it's more and more of a partnership. I think that the idea that we're going to lose the battle of creativity, no, it's going to make us better. It really will. It will make us better. And the downside of that is that we will be, as individuals, able to express ourselves better, stronger, faster with these tools. But that means that people who do it professionally are going to find themselves in an odd place. I mean, in the same sense that the programmers will find themselves in an odd place, lawyers who are having, if people are doing things professionally and you can do it with the machine, then yeah, that's going to hurt. And creativity is one of those areas.
If I can chime in, I don't know if many people here are followers of Ali Miller. Do you know her? She was like innovation AI expert at Amazon for a while. She just I missed the Coca-Cola one, but if you guys saw that, she highlighted a Times Square billboard at the NASDAQ that they created in 11 hours and brought it, and that was like their thing. I think, what Nishan said and others said, I think we're safe. When I think of what's the evolution, I think micro robots are going to be a thing. Robotics is the center of a lot of these LLMs. And so I do think we're going to go for automating a lot of, whatever the right term is, but those, lower paying roles. And so data scientists are going to be pretty busy building these systems for a while.
Stay
factory worker and that type of stuff.
On that side, the newer generation would be would find the software development work more fun compared to us who have to go through the grind of fixing the bugs, speaking with others.
And we're getting LLMs that are based on
Yeah.
robotics. So like Palm is that concept and other things. And there's these multimodality foundational models.
But one thing about the positions, we started with the business intelligence in the early 2000s and data analyst, business analyst, financial analyst. Then machine learning, AI, predictive analytics created data science jobs. Then data science sub-portion, like the partition within itself, machine learning engineers, AI engineers, right? There are a lot of variations and derivations came out, solutions architect. What I can see in the future, data engineering, for example, can merge with data scientists. Like, why not? Like, we can do both. Like, why don't we train ourselves on that?
Won't only be left data scientists. I mean, like seriously.
Yes.
The rest of the tech jobs are
Yeah.
going to go first.
Yeah, it's going to transform. The title name is going to change, but what we will know is going to be much broader, and what we're going to be responsible is going to be better, and we're going to be so fast in decision making. We don't have to talk to a data engineering guy. I think that we have to just deploy and develop right away. I'm very hopeful about that.
Okay, so the apocalypse is not near, and there are huge opportunities for
Always.
everybody in this room.
Yeah.
So it's a happy way to end it.
Although everyone has to embrace the notion that at some point,
Coming for you.
we will build things that are genuinely full rounded thinkers that are at least as smart as we are, probably smarter. And then what do? I mean, and it's not they're going to hunt us down and kill us. As long as you don't badmouth. No, it's that we have to think about what is a world in which We can do whatever we want that we don't, but we would not, it doesn't have to be work. It can still look like what we do. What does that world look like? And we'll see how we do as a species.
And I want to go back to that steam engine concept, because the world changed with the steam engine, right? And what happens is now the steam engine was a slow thing, 100 years evolution. This is going to be 20. So that's why I say it's going to be generational impact. Our generation is going to be really impacted by this. I don't know if it's this generation or the one right behind us, but somebody's going to be impacted. But after that, we will find new ways to enrich our lives. We'll value to things. We'll come up with new creative methods. But the speed of this is going to be
And we'll see if we, again, as a species, if we can, in the US culture, if we can, in the US, if we can get over the notion that we have for quite some time now evaluated people by their job, their work. And we have to get over that when there's something to prove that.
Let's continue the conversation over drinks. But for now, let's say thank you to our panelists. The Midway Club is on the 5th floor, so whenever everybody's ready, please head on up.